What's up, guys? Welcome to this exercisation. This is Nestor Adriansen, and today we will solve the mysterious question: should I use a measure or a calculated column in Power BI? Hey, before you get started, if this is the first time that you stop on my channel, please hit the subscribe button so you won't miss anything. Alright, guys, let's do it. Today we have 5 different points that we will talk about. Okay, the first one, of course, we will learn the key points about measures. The second point, we will learn about calculated columns as well. The third point here, we will learn how to create a measure and a calculated column in Power BI Desktop. Point number 4, we will learn the difference between a measure and a calculated column in Power BI. And finally, we have here 3 practical cases, my friends. So, guys, this is gonna be really fun, and let's keep going. Okay, measures. So for measures, we have right here 4 different key points. The first one, if you want to aggregate values from many rows in a table, you should use measures. The next point here, a measure is evaluated in the context of the cell evaluating a report or in a DAX query. The context of the cell depends on user selections in the report or on the shape of the DAX query. Really important, okay? The next point here, a measure needs to be defined in a table. However, the measure does not really belong to the table. So this means that we can move measures from one table to another. The last point here, a measure operates on aggregations of data defined by the current context, which depends on the filter applied in the report. If you guys want to learn more about measures, here we have these 2 great sources, okay? All right, now let's go to the next slide. Calculated columns, okay? You can extend a table by creating new columns. The content of the column is defined by a DAX expression evaluated row by row. This is key, my friends, row by row. Okay, the next point here, a calculated column is just like any other column in a table, and you can use it in any part of a report. The next point here, you can also use a calculated column to define a relationship. Really important as well. The next point, calculated columns are computed during data refresh and then stored in the model. Okay, therefore, calculated columns occupy space in memory. So we have to be really careful about this, okay? Because we don't want to make the model slow, right? So if we have to choose between a calculated column and a measure, we have to select a measure because measures don't occupy space in memory. So the final point here, if you have a complex formula for a calculated column, don't separate the steps of computation in different intermediate columns because each intermediate calculation is stored in RAM and wastes space. All right, so now let's go to the next slide. All right, so now we're gonna learn how to create a measure and a calculated column in Power BI. Okay, here on the left, we have a screenshot. So if you go to the table, right click, and then this new window pops up. And you have right here 2 options. If you wanna create a measure, of course, you have to select new measure. Or if you wanna create a new column or a calculated column, of course, you have to select new column here. Okay, so the second way is on the right. So if you go to the modeling part, you have 2 options. The one on the left says new measure. If you want to create a measure, you have to select this one right here. And then if you want to create a new column or a calculated column, of course, you have to select new column. Okay, so that's how it works in Power BI Desktop. And now let's go to the next slide. So now we have to solve this question. Should I use a measure or should I use a calculated column? Okay, so when should we apply a measure? So you should apply a measure if you want to display resulting values in the values area of a pivot table or in the plot area of a chart, right? What else? If you want to calculate profit percentage on a certain selection of data, okay? Really important as well. What else? You can also use a measure, or you should use a measure if you want to calculate ratios of a product compared to all products. Okay, really important. Okay, so now when should we use a calculated column? You should use a calculated column if you want to place the calculated results in a slicer or see the results in rows or columns in a pivot table or in the axis of a chart, or use the result as a filter condition in a DAX query. What else? If you want to define an expression that is strictly bound to the current row. Remember, calculated columns, they do the analysis row by row. So this is really important. And finally, you can also use a calculated column if you want to categorize text or numbers. Example here, a range of values for a measure. All right, so now let's go to the next slide. Here we have practical cases. I know you guys want to put everything into practice, and this is it. This is the time, my friends. First question, find the delivery time for all file claims. We have right here a hint. This calculation is strictly bound to the current row. Okay? All right, so now let's go to Power BI Desktop. All right, so here we are in Power BI Desktop. Okay, so let's take a look at this data real quick. If we go to data, so here we have claim date, right? And we also have delivery date. So, and the first question was find the delivery time in days, right? For every single file claim. So, how do we do that? And remember, there was a hint, and the hint was this is a row by row calculation. So, if that's the case, we need to use a calculated column, right? So, how do we do that? Quite straightforward. Right click right here, new column. Remember that? Okay, and we're gonna call it delivery time days. Okay, and of course we need the difference here, right? Delivery date, right, minus claim date. All right, so what else? Because we are subtracting two dates, and we need to have just a number, just one number. So what we're gonna do here is use the integer function. Okay, it's right there because we want to have just one number, which is the number of days. So that's why we're doing that. And then close parentheses and then hit approve. And let's see what happens. Okay, so let's take a look at data here. And there should be a new column right here. See, this is what's happening. We see right here the delivery time in days, 4 days, 6 days, and so on, right? For every single file claim. So now let's go back to report and remember that we can create a visualization. So let's do that. So what we're gonna do here is create a table. It's right there. And then let's select claim ID. We can also select claim date, right? It's right there. And of course, we can go to this part right here and then just claim date right there. Okay. Okay, we can also select right here delivery date. So let's do that. It's right here. And of course, we're gonna do the same here. Delivery date. Okay, so what else do we have here? So if you guys can see claim ID, I don't know what's going on here. Let's check claim ID right here. And we don't need to summarize this. All right, so that's what we have. And what we're going to do now is remember that a calculated column is helpful if we want to insert a slicer, right? So let's do that. Let's insert a slicer here real quick. It's right there. And then let's use this new calculated column. And we can also edit this one right here if we want. So let's do list. Okay, so we know that delivery time goes from 2 to 10 days. So now let's say that we want to learn which claims took just 2 days. Let's do that. Select 2. Boom, there it is. We have 3 claims. See, this is very helpful. So how about if we want to learn 10 days? Let's select 10 days right here. We have just 1 claim. So guys, that's how it works. And let's remove these changes right here. There you guys have it. So now let's go back to the presentation. So the second question here is find the gross margin for all products claimed. And we have a hint here, gross margin equals to the difference between total sales and total cost. So let's do that. Let's go back to Power BI Desktop. So for this question, for the second question, we have 2 options. We can create a calculated column or we can create a measure. Okay, so we're gonna do both and let's do it right now. So we're gonna do right here, right click again, new column. And we're gonna call this gross margin. Equal, I'll enter. And of course, remember the hint, this should be collected premium because that's the number of sales that we have done, right? Minus cost, which is in this case total cost. And then hit enter and let's see what happens. Boom. There you guys have it. So let's go back to data real quick. And let's go to the right here. And there you guys have it. Gross margin, the difference between collected premium and total cost. 1,000 minus 600, 400, right? And we have this information for every single file claim. All right. So it's working fine. So now let's go back to report. And of course here, we can also solve this question by using a measure. So let's do that. But before we do that, let's create a table just for measures. Okay, so this is a good practice, my friends. And let's call this all measures if we want. So it's right there. It's loading. All right, so here we have the new table called all measures. So what we're gonna do next is right click and then select new measure. So we're gonna call this measure gross margin, okay, 2. Then equal, I'll enter. And right here, we're gonna use aggregations, right? So what we're gonna do here is use the sum function equal, and of course we need to sum collected premium, right? Then close parentheses, minus the same thing here, the sum function. And remember here, we need to select total cost. Close parentheses. All right. Remember here, this measure is in the claims table, and we just created a table just for measures. So what we're gonna do next is select this measure and move it. So let's move this. Remember here we are under measure tools, and let's select right here all measures. See, now you can see the measure right here, and the functionality hasn't changed, so which is great. So we just finished this part, and now let's go to page 2 and let's create a visualization here, a table here, right? And then let's select product claim. It's right there. Okay, so if you wanna have this a little bit bigger, we can do that as well. Go to format, values here, There it is. So this is better. Okay. So we have right here product claim, right? So how about if we have right here also collected premium? So let's do that. What is collected premium here? This should be right here. Collected premium. Boom. There it is. See? What else? How about if we need to have right here also total cost? So let's do that. Total cost should be right here. Boom. There it is. That's how it works, my friends. And also remember, we created a new column, right? And the name was gross margin. So we can do this as well. Check this out. There it is. And also you can select this column and you can add comma as a thousands separator. It's right there. So we can read these numbers better. Okay. And also remember, we just created a measure, right? And the measure was gross margin. So let's do that. We should have the same results according to what I just mentioned. Let's do that. Boom. There it is, my friends. It's working perfectly. So also, if we want to add a comma as a thousand separator, we can do that as well. Select the measure here and then comma. There it is. That's how it works, my friends. All right, guys, that's how it works. So now let's go back to our presentation. So the last question here is find the gross margin percentage for all products claimed. Hint, use variables to make the code more readable. Cool. Okay, so let's go back to Power BI Desktop. All right, so let's do this. Remember, they are talking about percentages. And if they are talking about percentages, we need to use a measure. Okay, so let's do that. Right click here, new measure. And we're gonna call this measure gross margin equal. I'll enter. And also we have a hint here that we can use variables to make the code more readable. So let's do that. Var. If you're not familiar with variables, I'm gonna share with you guys a link as well because I have a tutorial about the basics. Okay, so let's add right here the name for this variable and we're gonna call this collected premium. Okay, and of course we need to use the sum function here because this is an aggregation, right? And we need to select right here collected premium, close parentheses. I'll enter another variable here and we're gonna call this total cost. Remember, this is the name of the variable. Let's not get confused with the name of the column, okay? Same thing here, we need to use the sum function. And of course, this should be total cost. I'll enter, variable again. And right here, we can also create a new variable, and we're gonna call this gross margin 3 equal. Of course, this should be the difference between the first two variables. Collected premium. Remember, this should be the variables, okay? Collected premium minus total cost. With a variable there, I'll enter. And then we need to use the return expression here. And here, of course, because this is a percentage, we need to use a divide function, right? Numerator. What's the numerator? The numerator is the last variable that we just created, which is gross margin 3, right? It's right there. Comma. The denominator should be collected premium. Close parentheses. And let's see what happens. Let's approve this. Boom. It seems like it's working, guys. So let's see if that's correct. All right, so let's select this table right here. And now, how about if we want to add right here the percentage for each product claim? Let's do that. Let's drag this measure, this new measure, into this chart. and let's see what happens. There it is, my friends. There it is. Okay, so remember, we can select also this measure here and then percentage, right? Because this is percentage. There it is. All right, guys, that's how it works. Now let's go back to our presentation. All right, guys, that was it. As a summary, we learned about how to create calculated columns and also how to create measures in Power BI Desktop. And also we learned when we should be using these two powerful tools. Okay, remember, if we want to do a row by row calculation, a calculated column should be selected. But if we want to aggregate values or calculate percentages or ratios, we need to select a measure. Okay, all right, guys, that was it. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If so, please give me a thumbs up, share with your friends, and of course, don't forget to subscribe because you don't want to miss anything. Thank you, guys, and see you in my next tutorial.